Hey students, this is our next lesson, and at this point you should have used Magic Cut already to create a new layer with just your apple. But as part of this lesson, I want to talk to you about other ways that we can do that kind of thing using the selection tools. So just watch this. You don't need to do this, just watch. I'm going to go to this original layer where the apple is on the background. It's one and the same. Typically, if we go to our selection tools right here, we have rectangular select. And normally, the most effective way to create a new layer is if you select something on a layer, and then you copy it, and then you paste it, and then I go to my move tool, it gave me a new layer of just whatever I pasted. So that fundamental is key. It's going to be part of your bread and butter. But the problem is I don't want all that background. So let me just erase that layer. Let's try again. All right. So we have the rectangular select tool. We also have the ellipse select tool. The way that works is you click and drag a circle or an oval. Now, if you hold Shift, it gives you a perfect circle. And the same with the rectangle. If you hold Shift, it gives you a perfect square. So I could select it like that, but that's not going to give me what I want either. So I'll hit Command D to deselect. Now what's next? We have the lasso select tool. I'm going to move in close for this. This is a little bit more about what I want to see. The lasso lets you draw around what you want to select. And if you let go, it just completes the selection from where you started. But the problem is I don't want to draw all the way around the apple in one shot. That'd be hard to do. So we want to know how to add and subtract to a selection. So there's two ways that you can add to a selection. One, if you hold the Shift button and then you continue drawing, it adds to the selection. If you hold the Option key, it will subtract from a selection. But a lot of people like to use this setting up here on the upper left. There's this mode here called, it's a new selection. So that the way that works is if you select, it gets rid of the old one and makes a new one. So if I start drawing around the apple, for example, and I want to add to the selection, I can click on this one. This is, we're adding or uniting. So now I can pick up and continue my tracing, and I can move around the apple, and I can start adding into it. Let's say I accidentally selected the books down here. I can go up here to subtract. So this is subtract, and then what that does is it lets you go around what you want to get rid of, and then that takes that away. So this is the lasso tool. And these are the add and subtract functions. And by the way, the add and subtract functions also work with the rectangle and the ellipse select tool as well. Okay. The next one is Polygonal Lasso tool. All the same things apply. But the way this Polygonal Lasso tool works is it gives you straight lines. So you click once, and then wherever you click again, it gives you plot points. And this is wonderful if you're trying to select things that have corners and straight edges. Not so great if I could like try to just do lots and lots of clicks here, but it's not so great if you're trying to choose something rounded like the apple. And then next we have this one called the Magnetic Lasso Select tool. And I'll zoom in real close on this so you can see. This is pretty cool because what it does is it recognizes the difference in contrast of the pixels themselves, and then as you click and drag, can't see it yet, hopefully, there we go. You can see the line is kind of sticking, and it is not perfect, honestly, when the color, and every time you click around, you get a plot point, and it'll close the selection. So let's say I want to get rid of that. I can go to subtract, and try to carefully trace, and it just makes my tracing a little more accurate. So you've got to be, go back to add. You have to try to trace accurately, but when you're not perfect, for some reason this thing is just not working out. That's okay, because the whole point of this lesson here is that you're not going to find one selection tool to do the job for you. You have to use your problem-solving capability, and you have to use a combination of selection tools quite often. So let's look at some other ones. I'm going to deselect. So we've looked at all of these, and then next we have the object selection tool, the quick selection tool, and the magic wand. So the magic wand, it works like this. When you click on a pixel, it selects other pixels of the same color. And in add mode, you can keep clicking, adding to your selection. And at the very least, whoops, I'm going to undo that. Well, you know what, I'll keep that for now. At the very least, the magic wand tool can be really useful to help you select good, clean edges. Like that. And then, when I feel like I have got my good, clean edges, then I can switch to another tool. Like I don't want any of those books, so I can go to my rectangle select tool, go to subtract. I can subtract out these details that I don't want. Like just subtract them all out just like that. Now on the same note, I want to add in stuff inside the apple, so I'll go to add mode with my lasso, and I can just quickly draw around those. All those bits that didn't get added to the selection originally, I can just draw around them like that, and they get added in. Looks like on the upper left up here, I need to subtract some of this out, so I can just draw around all that while I'm in subtract mode. And then, of course, let's take a look at this stem. That wasn't perfect either, so I'll go to add mode, and I'll just kind of add this in. Here we go. So now I have a decent selection of my apple. Now I could copy it with Command C and paste it with Command V, and now I've got a good apple. So I just did undo on that, undo. So that's one way to do it. That's the magic wand tool. I'll deselect. We have the quick selection tool, which is really great, especially with something like the apple here. You click on it, and it just grabbed it all. It's super intelligent, but it doesn't grab my stem very easily. So this is where I might go back to my lasso tool and add mode and select it more carefully. And you can zoom in really closely, by the way. See how that works? Just really get in there. And then you can copy and paste that. I'll hit deselect. And then one more here is the object selection. The way this works is you click and drag, and you got to put that cross, that plus sign, inside your object. When you let go, it sort of intelligently grabs what it thinks you're trying to grab. But again, that was not perfect either. That could be a situation where now I switch to a different tool and make that adjustment. Okay, so these are selection tools that are really useful. And you want to be familiar with using add and subtract mode to select things perfectly. I'm going to hit deselect, and now we're going to do a step that you're done watching, and I want you to bring in your cheetah. So you're going to go to File, and you're going to choose Open and Place, and then you're going to find Cheetah, and you're going to bring in the cheetah. You're going to hit Open. And when we clicked Open and Place, that puts it in our project. It places it as a new layer. Okay, so you can see this cheetah is its own layer. And I'm going to go ahead and resize this. I have to hold Shift when I resize it, when I grab it by the corner and pull. If you just do this, it'll get all distorted, potentially. So if I hold Shift, it will keep it proportional. So what I want to try to do is get the mouth about the size of the apple, the edge of the apple like that. I'm good with that. And before I start doing stuff to this cheetah, I want to duplicate the layer. So I'm on this layer. There's different ways to do that. One, you can click and drag the layer over top of the new layer button, and that will duplicate it. You can use your 2 fingers or right click to get your action menu, and you can choose duplicate layer that way. Or you can go to the layer menu and choose duplicate layer that way. It also shows you that you can hit Command J as your shortcut to duplicate a layer. So this is called cheetah copy. I'll go ahead and make my original cheetah layer invisible, and I'll just move it down below in case I need it later. But this is the cheetah copy is the one I'm going to play around with now. So let's zoom in here. I'm going to go to my move tool, and I'm going to place it. Now, what I want to do is I want to put this mouth on the apple. I want to make it look like the apple has the mouth, not the cheetah. So in order to do that, I need to select this mouth really well, and then I'm going to copy and paste it into a new layer. Now, I'm going to go back to Magic Cut, because this would be one way to do it. And I'm not going to use Magic Cut the same way as I did before. I'm just going to use it as a tool. And right there, you can see it's not grabbing all the mouth. But what I really care about is like the edge of the mouth, the tongue and the teeth. So I'll go ahead and switch to my green and make sure the tongue is included in here, and the lower lip, and all this up here. I do want a little bit of the fur around the lip, just a little bit of it. You'll see why later. Okay, and but if I zoom in, you can see I'm not getting the tooth well. So I'll go to my green, make my brush smaller, and I'm gonna just say, hey, Magic Cut, I want you to include those things, but now it included too much. So I'll go to my red and say, hey, Magic Cut, I don't want all this background stuff. Let's see what it does. That's getting a lot better. I don't want that bit right there either. It's a little bit better. Whoops. So spacebar lets me, or we can click on the hand here, and then you can sort of travel around and inspect a little bit. Okay. It's not perfect, but it's a good start. So what I'm going to do is on the upper right, if it was set to new layer like last time, I want you to set on the upper right, set it to selection, and then hit OK. And look what it does. All it did, it didn't give me a new layer. All it did was put that selection in place. Now I'm in a really good position to adjust this selection. So I'm going to zoom in real close with Command Plus. I'll just go to my lasso tool to add mode. And then I'm just going to travel around here. I don't want this white stuff, so I'll go to subtract mode. I need the black lip about right here to be very normal looking. So then I'll just get rid of all this. Now I'm just going to travel around and make sure nothing is getting oddly cut off. I think I'll subtract out kind of this and make this a little bit cleaner. That's not so bad. Down here is a little weird. I'll go to add mode. Kind of add this in. It's getting around that tooth okay, I think. Oop. If you make a mistake, just hit Command Z. All right, now let's look at the tongue area. Oop. Add mode. Make this look a little bit nicer. I don't want all this stuff, so I'm going to go to subtract mode. Like that. But I do want this lip, so I'll go to add mode. Like that. Okay, so now when I back out, I don't want all that stuff, so I'll go to subtract mode. I don't want the nose either, but I'm going to keep some of that white fur. It's going to help me blend the layer in later, but I'm just going to select around all the stuff that I don't want. There we go. All right, so I'm satisfied with this selection. So now I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, and Paste, or Command C, Command B. And I can make my original cheetah copy invisible. Now I have layer 1. I'm going to double click on that. I'll name it mouth. Go back to my move tool. Now I can move this wherever I want to, can't I? All right, so let's look at it. And what I want to do is I want to line it up, and I like to make it so that the this black upper lip just is touching the edge of the apple, but I want the bottom lower lip to be touching the edge of the apple too. So I'll hold shift and I'm gonna resize it, right? How about like right there looks pretty good. And that looks pretty good there. Push it out a little bit. Okay, so I like that. And before I go any further, I'm gonna save, file and save, because we just did some work and I don't want this thing to get gummed up and shut down on me and then lose all that work. Okay, so here's the next part of the lesson. What we're going to learn about is called a raster mask, or it's also called a layer mask on Photoshop. So I'm going to go to my apple layer, the floating one, and I need to put the cheetah layer above it. There we go. So if the apple layer is invisible, I'm seeing the Apple Books copy underneath it. I don't want that. What I want is the background on, then the apple on, and then the mouth on. So these top 3 layers are key. All right, so the idea is if I go to my apple and I switch to my eraser, you can press E for eraser, but if you click and hold on this, we have a lot of options here. The brush tool, the pencil tool, the clone tool, the eraser tool. And the eraser tool has brush size. And if I start erasing that while I'm on that layer, that looks pretty cool. This is the actual look that I want to achieve so far. But I don't want to teach you to use the eraser tool. Erasing is too permanent, so I'm going to hit Command Z and undo. Here's the new skill. We're going to use something called a raster mask. So I'm going to click on Layer, go down to Raster Mask, and choose Add Reveal All. And look what that did next to my apple layer. It linked this little white thing to it. Now here's how it works. Anything in there that is painted white will be visible, and anything painted black will be invisible. It'll seem erased. So I'm going to go to my brush tool, or B for brush. And down here on the lower left, hopefully you can see the white and the black. The top one is called your foreground color, the bottom one is called your background color, and you can switch between them by clicking on that little double arrow. So right now I'm on white. If I make my brush bigger, nothing happens when I paint white because my raster mask is already white. But if I switch back to black, there we go. Now anything I paint black, this is not the eraser, this is the brush tool with black paint. You can see on the raster mask on the layers palette, that little bit of black right there, it acts as an eraser. But guess what? If I'm like, oh no, I didn't want to do that, I can switch back to white and I can bring it back. It's called a raster mask, or on regular Photoshop, it's called a layer mask. But this is something that you're going to use for the rest of this term, this session. This is a fundamental basic skill. So I'm going to go ahead and erase the apple layer with the raster mask, and that looks really cool. It makes it look like, oh yeah, the apple, the mouth is open. But look at the mouth itself. It's not blending well into the apple. It looks photoshopped, right? It looks choppy. So I'm going to go to the mouth layer, and I'm going to give that one a raster mask by going to the layer menu, go down to raster mask, reveal all. Now I can do the same thing. I can start to erase it, but that's not the look I want. That's not good. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. If I go to my brush setting, I can lower the hardness of the brush, or I can choose a fuzzy brush here and then resize my brush how I want it. But what that does, the hardness of your brush, it lets you blend and fade. You see? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fade it in so that the apple looks like it is blending getting blended with the black lip in a natural, realistic looking way. You gotta take your time. Now, if you overshoot it, you're like, oh no, I erased the tongue. Switch back to white and just put it back. That's why using a raster mask or layer mask is so beneficial. Now, if your brush is too big, your fade's going to be a little bit too not gradual enough. So make sure your brush is sized properly to get the right look. Might need to be a little small like this. So what I'm doing here is, and you can see the black showing up on the layer, on the raster mask next to my mouth. Getting rid of all this junk. Like that. And I'll come up to the top here. I don't want this fur. Let me make it smaller. All right, now the problem is when I get up here, I don't want it to have that, I don't want it to have this blended look. You know what I mean? I don't want it to be, that looks fake. So I need to go back to my brush setting and increase the hardness of the brush. I'll go back to white and then I will make that lip right there look a little bit more. There we go. And then maybe I need to adjust my softness just to get a little bit of a fade, like right there we go. That looks good. All right, so now when we look out, that looks a little bit more natural. And then let me also evaluate how it looks down here. I think I want to have white. Turn that on. You know, that doesn't actually look so bad right there. Good. All right, so now it looks real. It's like actually happening. This looks like an illusion. If someone came from outer space and saw this picture, they'd be like, wow, what kind of species of apples do they have down there? It would be really awesome. So now I'm going to hit File and Save. And that's going to conclude today's lesson. Remember, we learned about the selection tools, the different rectangular ellipse, lasso tools. We learned how to add and subtract from selections. We learned about object selection, quick selection, and magic wand. Okay. We learned how you can copy and paste a selection, and when you do that, it pastes it into its own new layer. And then we learned how you can use a raster mask to erase and blend layers together without permanently erasing them as well. Okay. Have a good day.